and tonight we are having stories for children from the amazing, the wonderful, the incomparable Sarah Lloyd-Winder. Now, I shall be disappearing halfway through this, in fact, very soon. So I will explain what's coming up later in the week. Next Tuesday, we have our International Young Tellers at 5 o'clock UK time. And Friday, we've got Despina, telling stories from children. Yeah, okay, don't tell me off, Sarah. But because, and I'm in somewhere where there is a almost unstable as me, an unstable connection. So, so Sarah, are you ready?
I am totally ready.
So could we have a round of applause for King Louis? No, I mean Sarah Lloyd-Winder.
King Louis, yay! For the audience, yay! And for the person you can't see, who is the dog who's just walked in, because I left the doors open. Never leave your doors open when you're telling a story, because you don't.
Well, in that case, we'll have Cos. Cos can shout. Cos, who you know.
Hello.
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 Where are you guys? Hello, everyone. Just come out of the caravan. I'm making me dinner. Look.
You have your dinner. We'll have a story.
Some plate juggling for you. Whoa, that was a close one. Hey.
Right. Should we give it back to Sarah?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I've got a story. You
got a story. You want to tell a story, Sarah?
I'll tell a story. It's been what I'm doing for the evening. Okay.
Yeah, that'll be it. If I disappear, I apologise.
That is fine. I will finish off at the end and send people away into the ether. So, welcome to my little room here in South Main, which we had a little bit of problem with because there is a whole load of stuff and there was a mirror behind there that I couldn't move. So I didn't want you seeing well, it's just really difficult with the glare. So that's why the banner's gone up and there's been a little bit of disruption. But stories are about to start. Next week, I'm telling stories, and one of the stories I'm telling I've not told before. So I thought I would be here for an introduction. I come from the county of Somerset, or in the past, Somersetshire, or before that, Wessex. Now, Wessex was a kingdom. And the first and the greatest king of Wessex was called Alfred. Long ago that we don't even know whether he was real, but Alfred was definitely real. He was definitely a person. Now, he had a big brother. And so he thought, I will never be king because my big brother will be king. But unfortunately, his big brother did become king, but then died. His big brother had a little child, but the little baby couldn't be king and run an army. So everybody turned round to Alfred and said, Alfred, you have to be king. So he became king without expecting to be king. He ruled in Wessex. Now, Wessex was a land where if you went too far wet, you got very wet. You got very wet because it was the marshlands, the boglands, the island. You see, the bit that was island was that Glastonbury Tor bit. That thing with the little tower on the top. And when you needed to hide, that's where you went. But you went further out and further across and you got to the beautiful hills and the chalklands of Wessex, the highlands, where you can see for miles and miles. Well, Alfred, when he was there, he was fighting the Vikings, the Danes who were coming over. He was a king. He wanted to hold on to his land, but the Vikings were getting closer and closer and closer. And there would be battles. And sometimes you win and sometimes you lose. That's the way with battles. Nowadays we think, oh, battle, that's it, over, done with. No, battles run away, turn back and battle again. So Alfred, there he was, he'd lost the battle. He had to run. So where did he run? He ran to the wetlands, the land of Glastonbury. Now that time there wasn't that little tower on the hill, but it still stuck out because everywhere around it was marsh and bog and marsh. And in the winter, it was just a lake. It was a great place to hide because who wanted to chase somebody in a bog? So that's where Alfred ran. He took off all his regal clothes and he hid his horses and he walked like a peasant, dressed in the browns and the greens of the peasants. And he ended up in a little house just near Glastonbury. Well, it's a village away. It's called Boltonsborough, and there's not much of it. Even today, there's just a pub and a few houses. It's not a great big place. It's a modest place. And a modest place is always a good place to hide. And that's what happened. Alfred, he went and hid. He went and hid in a little cottage where nobody would think a king would hide. Where would the king hide? The king hides in his castle. The king hides somewhere. No, Alfred was too clever. Alfred hid in a little cottage. Except he hid there for a while. And the friend to stay, and he never does anything. He doesn't help out round the house. Watch the cakes. Now, they didn't have ovens in that time. They would have had a flat piece of metal over the fire, and on it they would have put the cakes. So she wouldn't have been gone too long. But you see, as well as being a king, Alfred was a bit of a daydreamer. And when you're a king and you've lost in a battle, you've got a lot to daydream about. He daydreamed about how I'm going to win the next battle. He daydreamed about who would fight with him. He daydreamed about what time of year to fight. He daydreamed about when he won again and he was king and he would be crowned again and everything like that. So what happened to the cakes? The cakes got drier and they got drier. Notice the smell. Most people notice the smell, the burning smell. He didn't even notice that. He was away with the cuckoos. And gradually the cakes shriveled and shriveled and shriveled until his friend's wife came back inside. She knew what he was, but she wasn't having any of it. King or not, all I asked you to do was to look after the cakes. And could you do that? Now, in many parts of the country, in many places, women have sometimes said this to their partners. I believe I might have said it to somebody I know even last night. Could you not just look and watch? No. No, people are away with the cuckoos and they couldn't. And so the cakes burnt. Now, when the cakes burn, that is your whole day's supply of wheat. So it was more difficult. The king was hiding. They had to pretend there wasn't anybody there. They had to pretend that there was no extra buying of anything. But she knew that she couldn't do that one again, leave a man like that to look after her cakes. Parent to child, since 800. That's over 1,000 years of children in Somerset have been taught that story, have known about the story, the place where it happened, have known about those people. Because, you know, when you grow up in Somerset, you tend to get a little bit proud of your only king. And especially because Alfred was called Alfred the Great. He did go on to do some great things, but the worst thing he ever did in his life was burn the caves. Thank you very much. So we're in Somerset. We're in olden times. And everyone, every young woman learns how to twist the wool. They are given wool in its raw form. They're given wool that looks like cotton wool, and they have to learn to pull it and twist it and make a thread. And then they have to learn to spin it. And often you would spin it just on a little piece of wood weighted at the bottom. And every child would know how to spin. It might be your job. It might be your responsibility. But in all the little houses, in all the little places, in a land that is full of sheep, every child learns how to spin wool. And this is a story from that time. The mother and the daughter lived in a little hut. They had 2 goats, and they would take the goats out every day. But they also had wool from sheep. They didn't own the sheep, them not very wealthy people. But they would be asked to spin the wool, to spin it to make thread, so that the weavers could weave. Well, as a little girl, Amelia used to be sent out every day to spin the wool. Now, in this day and age, you might have something to put that raw wool on, but she didn't. So she'd wind it round her hair in the morning. She'd take the spindle with her, and she'd take the goats out into the wood with her little basket full of lunch. She was a happy child, and she was a well-behaved child. Took her responsibilities off the goats very well. You see, the goats, they had to behave. They couldn't go in anybody else's land, and you had to keep an eye on them. Goats, you know, are terrible for eating the wrong thing. Goats, they eat other people's flowers, other people's things anyway. So she had to keep them in the wood so they wouldn't eat what they weren't supposed to. So off she went early in the morning, wool twisted round her hair, little spindle ready to go in her basket with lunch, and the 2 goats following her. They'd wend their way into the wood until they found a little spot where the sunlight came in, so there was grass, and she would sit there and watch the goats as she spun and spun and spun, pulling the hair. Spinning and spinning. And all day long she would do this. And at lunch she would have a break, eat her sandwich, see if there was anything around. If it was spring, there might be little wild strawberries, blackberries. And she would pick what she could and share with the goats. And then the evening, by the time that she had spun all the wool, she would place it all in her basket and go home. Take it to the weavers, for they would earn money for spinning the wool. Now you can tell I am in the beautiful countryside because you might be able to hear the church bells from across the way tinkling. Well, they're banging a bit, actually, but they're part of the story. So one day, when this girl went into the woods, she had her wool twisted round her hair, she had her spindle, she had her lunch, and the 2 goats following her, very well behaved this morning. And in she went, and she sat down, and she was spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, it looked like the tree in front of her moved. Wearing a long, long dress, so long it seemed to brush on the wild flowers. And she picked up the sides of her dress and she stuffed it in her belt. And then music appeared and the lady danced around, gently and beautifully danced around, waltzing and twisting and turning, and it was so elegant that Amelia's eyes couldn't do anything but follow her everywhere she went. She was still trying to spin as she watched, but she slowed down until and the beautiful woman came up and offered a hand and said, "Come dance with me." And so Amelia, she tucked her skirts up into her belt, and soon the 2 of them were gaily dancing round the beautiful grass elegantly. And it was such fun. And suddenly the light was going, and Amelia knew she had to get home, and she hadn't finished the spinning. She pulled the rest of the wool off her hair, stuffed it in the basket, covered the basket with leaves, and ran home. Her mother didn't notice that night, didn't notice the wool. Amelia, she was so annoyed with herself, how stupid she had been. The next day out she went. Wool twirled around her head, determined to concentrate. She had twice as much to spin today. And into the woods she went. Again, and she sat down concentrating on the spinning, not looking round, concentrating, having to do more and more until she could hear the music. She knew there was somebody dancing in front of her, but she tried not to look until she did look. And the woman was spinning around, and so was the spinning. So was her spinning. So no, suddenly she was just watching the beautiful lady dance, and the beautiful lady came towards her and put out her hand. But Amelia was brave. "I can't," she said. "I can't. I have to spin. I have to spin. If I don't spin, we don't get any money. And if we don't get any money, we don't live. And if we don't live, what is there?" "Don't worry, I'll help." She seemed to pick up the spindle and spin so fast that you couldn't see her fingers move. And suddenly, there in the basket was all twirled up, every last bit of wool. "Don't worry," said the lady. "It'll all be all right. It's ready now. Come and dance." And so little Amelia got up and she walked into the arms of the lady, and together they danced through the sunlit afternoon, into the sunlit evening, around and around, and then they spun and they spun and they laughed as their skirts twirled higher and higher, because nobody could see except the goats, and even the goats laughed at them. Nay. And Amelia said, "Thank you, lady. Thank you for a joy." And she picked up the basket with the wool all in the bottom, and she placed leaves on top, and she picked up the goats and she walked out of the wood. But then the basket began to feel heavy. She picked up one corner of the leaves and it was a gold coin. And she looked at it and she knew the stories. If the fairies give you gold and you look at it, it turns to dry leaves. And she thought how stupid she had been to not even remember to spin. And secondly, when somebody gave her a gift, she broke the rules. So she dragged her feet all the way home, even though she had had the best day dancing. She gave her mother the basket and she went to put the goats away. But suddenly there was her mother shouting at her, come here, she said, what is this in the basket? Leaves, mother, leaves, and the wool. I'm sorry, I did 2 days. I forgot yesterday. No, said the lady. No, look, there are gold coins. Where did you get them? Have you stolen them? She told her the story of dancing with a beautiful lady in the glade in the forest, and how lovely it had been, and how the first day she had forgotten to complete all her spinning. But on the second day she had tried not to dance with the lady, but the lady had helped her. Well, said her mother, that is a good story, and that is good gold. I don't think we will need to ever send you out into the forest again, just in case. So the girl never went again, but she always knew how to spin, a skill every girl knew how to do. Thank you. So Alfred burnt the cakes. The girl danced but got her gold. So I'm going to take the wool now, take it on with a traditional tale, a very traditional tale, a weaver's tale, the weaver's tale. So if you don't know, a weaving is throwing the wool across and back through a grid that opens and closes, opens and closes. It's remarkably simple, really, if you think about it. And people have been weaving for thousands and thousands of years, which is why when we tell the story, we have to look back so far. For the story of Ariadne goes to the dawn of Western time, doesn't it? If you think Western time dawn is about the Greeks, was about the time that they wrote the stories. So this is my little version, it's a shorter version that I will be telling children of the Ariadne story. There was once a girl who could spin and weave most beautifully, but it was the weaving that she was known for best. Her father, you see, he was a dyer of wool, not a dyer, but somebody. Now, those of you that are here that I can see who have been to Marrakesh knows that that is a place where they did a lot of dyeing, where colours were really important. Where Ariadne's father, he dyed purple. Purple is a very difficult dye, and he was renowned for dyeing the purple. Huge, great amounts of wool was dyed. Cloth was dyed. But you see, Ariadne, she was more than just a weaver. She was a weaver of pattern and picture. When she wove, it was more like making a magic carpet than making a piece of material. When she wove beautiful pictures. She would cut and snip and thread through. She was very good, so good that she began to get very proud of her weaving, and she would say so aloud to anybody who would listen. I am the best weaver around. I am the best weaver here. And then it got more because You have to get bigger and bigger. I am not only the best weaver here, I'm the best weaver on the whole continent, on the whole earth. Until it got to the point, I am the best weaver of anybody, man or the gods. They listen, don't they? They listen and they come down. And sometimes the gods are not pleased. The gods, they come and they say, no, you cannot be the best of all. So down came the god of weaving, the most beautiful god of weaving, the god of the gods. And she came down and she looked at this girl and she said, what is she saying? How can she say this? So she disguised herself as an old lady. And she crept through the town. And she came to the girl who was weaving and she said, girl, do you say you are the best weaver in all the world? Well, yes, said Ariadne. I know it is true. Everybody will tell you it is true. Are you sure that you are the best weaver in the whole world? Oh, yes, she said, the whole world, the whole universe. There are no gods even that can weave as well as me. And at that point, the old lady threw off her clothes. And there in front of Ariadne was a goddess of strength, a goddess of beauty. Excuse me, said Ariadne. Are you a goddess? Yes. And you've just come to this place? Yes. Ah, said Ariadne. So you are no better than me, really. You come here as a human to sit and look at my work like every other human does. Everybody comes to look at my work. It is so amazing. Have you seen how beautifully I can weave? I can weave pictures. Ah, said the goddess, but I can weave pictures better than you. For I am the goddess of beauty and weaving. No one is better than me. Okay, said Ariadne. Prove it. I challenge you. Come, we will sit and we will weave. And we will look and see who is best. Now, you may be thinking at this point that this is a bit risky. But if you were a girl who had spent her whole life knowing that she was the best at something, I'm not sure she would even believe that this was a goddess. Perhaps this was just a jumped up person from another town who disguised herself as an old woman. How do I know she's a goddess? The best way would be to challenge her to weave the most beautiful piece of cloth. So there they were, the girl and the goddess, sitting down beside their wooden looms, looms that you can still see today, looms that still work in the same way, with the warp and the weft, with a shuttle that zips across and back, and the little clippers that clip. So the girl and the goddess sat by their looms, decided in their minds what beauties they would put on their pictures. And at a set time, they looked at each other, nodded, and started. And so fast did they work that it was an amazing thing to come and see the flicking, the flicking, the flicking, the flicking, the flicking of fingers, the cloth, and emerging as it rolled out was the picture. Now the goddess, she painted pictures with her thread of the gods and their beauty, their gods and their might, the gods as you would want to see them. Of course, Neptune ruled the waves. Zeus commanded the land. Apollo ran across. But the girl, she depicted the other side of life. What the gods did to people, what the gods did to those unfortunate, all those bad stories that we don't like. When the gods cheat, when the gods use their power against humans, and she flicked and flicked and flicked and flicked. Forwards and backwards and forwards and backwards. Beautiful, 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 beautiful stitches and thread and stitches and thread. And both of them using gold and silver thread in their pictures. And of course, so amazing was it that people came to see. They walked past. They walked in and they looked. They marveled at the beauty of both. They were amazed at the accuracy, the divine presence of beauty. And the goddess was so annoyed at what she saw, the fine workmanship, the beauty, that for 1 second, because goddesses only have 1 split second to think, the goddess thought she is better than me. And if she is better than me, I do not want it to exist, either her or the work. So the goddess took her cutting tool and slashed and slashed and slashed the fabric into 1,000,001 pieces. And then she turned on the girl. Oh, girl who thinks you are so clever. Oh, girl who thinks you are better than the gods. Do not move, little girl, for you will only be able to do one thing from now onwards. You will only be able to spin. And the poor girl felt her arms stuck to her body, felt her body shrink and shrink and shrink. And her legs suddenly became many legs stuck out of her body. And her head disappeared and her face was covered with tiny little eyes because she had become a spider. And out of her abdomen came a thread, for now she was the animal, the insect that wove. And she weaves the most beautiful and exquisite things in nature. She weaves the webs that we see on the plants in our houses and around the place. She weaves those magic shapes that are so beautiful that when the sunlight shines in, it makes us smile, even though we don't like spiders. And that is my little way of telling that story. Thank you very much. The bells have stopped, but they'll come back. My big mistake, I opened the door. The dog is walking backwards and through, so he has his little tappy feet going past. So in this world of magic and bells and countryside and dogs and everything, I have one last story. Oh, and my feather has come off. Started off my tales going to Somerset, which is how I told Alfred Burns the cakes, my first story. So now we've come across country and we've come near where I am now. And we're going to Canterbury. And that's where my next story is set, about the same time as Alfred. There was once a princess of Canterbury. Her father only had his daughter, one daughter. So when he died, she would be queen. But he was worried about who would be king. He wanted to check she married well. But she was a quite determined young lady. Don't see why you should choose who I marry, she said. I think I should choose. I've got to spend all the time with him. So they came to an agreement. he would shepherd them in, and she could ask 3 questions. So the doors were thrown open and the young men came. Tall, short, fat, thin, nice, not so nice, happy, sad, grumpy, every sort. And each one, she asked her questions and she failed them all. So the king had to send out proclamations now, because it couldn't just be local people, it had to go further afield. So the letters went out a bit further. Still no one. And then the letters went out even further, so far further, they got to the Lake District. Now, for people in England, that is a long, long, long way away. I know there are 2 people on my screen who are from much further away, but no, the Lake District is a long, long, long way away if you live in Canterbury. There was a father with 3 sons who was desperate to get rid of them. And he said to the sons, right, there is a proclamation. The queen, down south, she will be a queen and she needs a husband, this young woman. And you should go down and try and impress her. She wants you to answer 3 questions. I'm sure you can do it. Well, the eldest 2, oh yes, they thought they were well in there. They were elegant. They were proper young men. They had learnt to fight. They had learnt to dress. They could write a good poem. That's what you need, isn't it? Poem, fight, and dress well. Excellent. Except when they got to number 3. Number didn't do any of those. Number 3 lived in the Lake District. He loved the lakes, the hills, the walking, the animals, the plants. His mother, she used to call him my Jack by the hedge. Jack, who dresses like he's just walked off the field, or even though he's a nobleman. Jack, who knows more about the plants than even the farmers. Jack, who knows the sound of every bird. Jack didn't want to go down and see some princess, but the father said, no, all or none, not paying for just one of you or 2 of you to go. Getting rid of you all at the same time, better chance I can get rid of one of you. So they were packed off. The first 2, elegantly dressed, sitting on their beautiful horses, ready to go. Jack, late, in an enormous greatcoat. Why are you wearing that? Because I need the pockets, he said. Pockets are good to collect things. And they looked at him. What's the hat? He had some silly pointy up hat. I always wear the hat. It's to keep my ears warm. He was a disaster from start to finish. They set off. They rode south. They hadn't gone far when he's off his horse, picking up stones, picking up twigs, finding nuts. They go further south. He's yapping away about finding an egg. He puts the egg in his pocket, all wrapped up with moss, just in case, he says it, and keep it warm. And then another twig, and then a nut. Are we ever going to get there? Eventually, they get all the way south to Canterbury. They get to the castle. And the poor gatekeeper there, he just opens the door that way. Just follow the others that way. So they crowd on in, with the eldest 2 having nipped off and quickly got flowers. So you can't go in to see a princess without flowers, can you? You have to have your flowers. So in they go. Big bows, beautiful flowers. But Jack walks in, looks at the princess, picks up the egg from out of his pocket and looks at the princess. What are you thinking? She says. I'm thinking, says Jack, this just there in your bosom where the dress is. You keep the egg really nice and warm. That's the best place to keep eggs and things warm, near your heart, you know. The room had gone silent. Nobody had ever talked about the princess's bosom before. Nobody had even thought about putting an egg in her bosom. But the princess was starting to giggle. Every single young man had said how beautiful her eyes were, how elegant her nose was. This one had come in and wanted to stick an egg down her chest. That was a good start. But she was not going to be impressed by one little answer. So she drew herself up and she said, well, if you did place an egg in the princess's bosom, how would you get it out, as you must not touch the princess in any way? Oh, well, said Jack immediately, and delved into his other pocket and brought out a stick. With this stick, isn't it amazing? We don't have these sort of wiggly trees. Somebody says it's a wiggly willow. We don't get those. And it's so good, isn't it? I could just flick the egg out. And at that point, people round the room were starting to shake with the giggles. This young man had come in, getting eggs out of princesses' bosoms with twiggly twigs. Princess had one last question. On earth would you grow one of those twigs then? And he delved back into his pocket and said, with this nut. Oh, I'm not that silly. I knew that I might never see this tree again, so I picked up the nut. And then the whole room collapsed. The princess was laughing out loud. She said, nobody's answered 3 questions like that before. The young man looked round and said, oh, do we have to be married now? And at that point, the king stepped forward. I think we need a pause here, he said. 2 weeks will be good enough. You go away and come back, and in 2 weeks we will have a conversation, young man. And with that, he moved his daughter out of the room because she had made some errors there. Well, Jack made it all the way back to the Lake District before, well, he had to turn around and come back. And when he came back this time, he was on his own and in his element. There were times when he could go and look in nests. There were times when he could climb trees. There were times when he could delve in water. And at one point, he saw some fish he'd never seen before, and he picked them up. A whole pocket full of fish he had. And there were twigs and eggs and a little dead beetle as well. Beautiful it was, all green with those big antlers. He got back to the princess and they ushered him straight in, sat him down at a table with a giant feast. Oh, he said, oh, it's very tiring coming all this way back. And he ate and he ate. And then, just about it, going to sleep, he said, oh, have you ever been pocket fishing? Said the princess, what is pocket fishing? Stick your finger in my pocket and you see if you can fish. It's great fun. Come. And he made her put her fingers in his pockets. And he put his hand inside and tweaked, pinched her fingers, and she laughed. But she did tickle a fish. And she brought it out quickly, and he picked up the fish and put it in a bowl on the table, and there it swam round and round. And she looked at him and said, are you tired? Have a rest. I'll keep my father away. So the young man lay on the table and slept. But suddenly he was awoken, trumpets sounding, king on the way, marching through the palace. Quickly the girl woke him up. I know I'm a princess, but you have to look as if you've been talking to me all night. Really, really you do. In marched the king. Right, he said, what have you been doing? Oh, we have been pocket fishing, said the princess. Pocket fishing? Yes, have you never been pocket fishing before? No, said the king. What is pocket fishing? Well, said Jack, and he opened up his pocket. If you put your hand in here, you can fish for fish. Would you like to try? Somehow Jack seemed to get people to do things that are totally ridiculous. Nobody else would get a king to walk in a room and stick their hand in his pocket, but Jack did. And the king put his hand in the pocket, and it was wet and cold and slimy. And it felt like little fish were pinching his fingers. And he pulled it out. And there in his hand was a little fish, its tail flicking. There is something magic about a creature, isn't there? Even when you're a king, it puts you in your place. And there was the king, looking at his hand, marvelling at a fish. Something so simple. And Jack rushed over with the bowl and made him drop the fish in the bowl. There are 2 more, he said. And he opened his pocket, and the king was desperately, like a 6-year-old, you know, desperately trying to find the other. Got one, dropping it in. Next one, the one more. Oh, I can't. Yes, I've got it. You have never seen a king so excited about fishing. If there was any man in the world who was suitable for his daughter, it was this man. He may be slightly odd, but he was incredible. And looking at his daughter's face, he realized it was a good match. And they say that when the King of Canterbury died and Jack became king, a whole new time of agriculture took over the land. And many people lived a better life. Just because the Princess of Canterbury chose with 3 questions who she would marry. And that is my story. So if you'd like to unmute and say hello. Hello, hello.
Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hello, Donald.
Hello, Louis. I've not seen
Hello.
you for a long time.
Me too.
Hi, everybody.
I've been very busy.
Your
Yeah.
screen, Donald, your screen is kind of funny.
It's lovely, isn't
No,
it?
that's just my face.
Louis, it's
I'm John. Note the beard.
see it.
Yes. This is the end of tonight.
Hey, Michael.
That's
Yeah,
it.
mate.
And we will
Bye.
have Young Tellers on Tuesday. I don't think there's Mike Rust on Sunday.
No.
So I'm hoping I haven't got anything else wrong. So more exciting teller next Friday, but I can't remember who it is.
It's me. It's me.
Oh,
So now you know what these things
Christmas.
Louis, my Louis.
So yeah, beware of Friday night. Beware. And the bells, you see, they've gone silent now, haven't they? So when I finish, they've gone silent. The dog's curled up on the bed now, so he's happy. Rather than running up and down. At one point during that story, he was going hand, you know, little paw going, come on, walk time. So I've upset the whole world. Thank you very much for being an amazing audience.
That's
Thank you.
okay.
Come
Thank
back
you,
again.
Sarah.
See you all again soon.
Okay,
And thank
thanks,
you
Sarah.
Hopefully,
for
yeah.
whoever is flying the carpet tonight in Old Marrakesh. Do love you. And thank you very much. See you all again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Donald.
Sarah.
Donald,
Bye.
congratulations on the baby.
Oh, thank